This is a better way. Today I'm going to be diving into a subject that often sparks both confusion and curiosity. Pathological lying. Really, I'm going to be unpacking why some people lie compulsively, not because they want to deceive or manipulate you, but because deep down they are trained to lie out of fear. And as you will see, the root of pathological lying is often less about moral weakness and more about survival strategies wired right into the brain. So if you've ever wondered, why do some people lie even when the truth seems harmless? Why do they lie just like that? Why does lie seem to become second nature? This episode is for you. If you have someone that you know that knows someone that needs to listen to this podcast, this is your cue to actually share the link with them. So let's start. So, you know, pathological liars are not born liars, they are usually trained. I know that there's a lot of misconception about, oh, these people were born this way. One of the most liberating statements is man by birth is tabula rasa, and experiences are call them the whiteboard markers that write on every single one of us. So, if you ever know anybody who you consider to be a pathological liar, one of the questions you want to ask is, where was this person raised? Who trained this person? Think about it. A child grows up in a home where mistakes are punished harshly, where parents are unpredictable, maybe even abusive. In that world, the truth is really very dangerous. You know why? Because obviously that child is going to get the beating of their life. So, what does the child do? They adapt. They learn to bend the truth, to invent a version of reality that keeps them safe. And over time, that lie telling becomes automatic. Now, if there's anything that you've learned from this particular podcast is neural pathway. I'm sure you've heard it from me a million and one times, and don't get tired, you will always keep hearing it from me, right? So think about it that this person has lied to a point where they have now created a neural pathway. And just like addictions, it's now automatic thoughts. So pathological lying, really, right, is not about the fact that this person is a bad person. So neuroscience actually supports this. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, becomes hyperactive in children raised in fear-based environments. So the moment they anticipate any kind of punishment, what happens is that the amygdala is triggered and their brain's defense strategy becomes lies. So pathological lying rather is fear driven reflex. That's what it really is. It wasn't designed as a tool for manipulation. That child wasn't trying to manipulate anybody. The child was just trying to protect themselves from danger, which is a natural human occurrence. We all, from childhood up until this point, we are always developing coping strategies to get through life. So, avoidance is the game. As we start to develop, the concept of avoidance conditioning is when a behavior helps you to escape a painful outcome. What happens is that the first time you deploy that strategy and it works, your brain remembers it and stores it. The next time you are faced with that kind of situation, what happens? Your brain repeats it. And the more your brain repeats it, the more it fires with other neurons. And what's happening? A new neural pathway is being created. So, if for example, telling the truth led you to punishment, but lying did not, what do you think will happen? You would always lie. So over time, your prefrontal cortex grabs that information and says, yeah, this is what I need to do. every single time I need to survive. So instead of pausing to ask, is this the right thing to say? Your brain just goes off because it has now become a neural pathway. It is now an automatic reaction. You don't think about it, you just say it. So here's an interesting part, right? MRI scans have shown that chronic liars actually develop a different white matter connection in their brain compared to non liars. A famous study from a British Journal of Psychiatry found that pathological liars, as we would like to call them, have more neural connection in the prefrontal cortex. More connection mean that they can fabricate stories faster with less cognitive efforts. You know why? They've done this over and over and over and over and over and over again. And then what has happened now is that their brain has become wired for deception. So in the beginning, it was not deception. Deception was not the fundamental need. Deception was not the goal. But because of the repeated patterns and the multiple white matter connections that have happened in the brain, deception is now the output of that continued behavior. At the end of the day, deception is now used for safety. Deception is now a tool for safety. At the end of the day, the first thing was, I just want to say something that's going to get me out of this place, right? I just want to save myself. But the more you did it, the more this person did it, the more they said it then becomes what you would refer to as second nature. Now, the human nervous system has two major gears: the sympathetic nervous system, which powers fight, flight, or freeze, and then the parasympathetic nervous system, which allows for calm and connection. Children raised in fear spend more time in the sympathetic state. Their bodies are constantly bracing for impact. Impacts such as attack, they are always in, okay, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? So lying becomes a quick way to avoid confrontation, more like a flight response in words. So pathological lying isn't just a psychological habit, it is a nervous system adaptation. What does that mean? It means that the person's body has associated truth with danger. Their body has associated lying with safety. In other words, if I tell the truth, I will be in danger. If I lie, then I'm safe. Automatically, the body will gravitate towards safety. This means that when you confront a pathological liar, for example, you're not just battling their story, you are battling their entire biology, because mind and body is connected, and that entire thing has shaped who they are. One thing that you may find very hard to believe, and I tell you this from experience in therapy, interacting with people, is that people who lie, the people who you consider pathological liars, they do not like to lie. As a matter of fact, a number of them hate that they lie. They have deep seated shame. They carry it, they wear it as a cloth. Even if they wear shame as a cloth, this shame is hardwired into their brain's anterior cingulate cortex. This is the part that is really responsible for processing guilt and error. So every time they lie, they may feel an internal sting, but fear often outweighs shame. So what happens is that they live in a circle. They lie to avoid fear and feel shame, then they lie again to cover shame. So you see now that even if they have lied to avoid danger, something else pops up in their brain, which is shame. They take the only solution they have, which is lie, to now also cover shame. Now, my attempt here is for us to, for whatever reason, make, even if it's a fraction of attempt, to look at the pathological liar with empathy, to see how they have gotten to where they are, not because they are inherently bad people, but they just wanted to survive. So they are not really bad people, right? They are just carrying invisible scars from where they have been raised. So, can pathological lying be healed? And I'm sure this is the question that you have in your mind. If you're someone who's been battling with this or know someone who's been hurt by this, right? I'm sure the question you're asking is, can it be healed? Is there a solution? The answer simply is yes. But like you know, I don't give quick fixes. This is not a simple flip of the switch. No. So, but here is the first step, right? Let's start with the roots, which is the lie began to keep you safe. Now, what should you do to stay safe? Now, therapy, like I would always recommend, provides you a non-judgmental space. And one of the value of having a good therapist is that a good therapist does not seek to change your values. A good therapist does not condemn you because you already feel the guilt and with shame. But a good therapy space allows for your nervous system to unlearn fear. And when your brain starts to trust that truth won't hurt or lead to harm, the amygdala begins to calm down. So, inevitably, what therapy does for you is that it creates safety. You don't need to be performative. You don't need to be a good person. You don't need to perform. And that is what a good therapy space and a good therapist does for you. It helps you begin to establish safety. Now, another powerful approach really is to go deep into what we will call trauma or post-traumatic stress or informed trauma therapy. Now, what does informed trauma therapy do? Since many pathological liars, right, come from traumatic background, addressing the root cause of that wound, the abuse, the neglect, right, can help to dismantle that survival wiring. Because what is happening is that you have taken a survival programming and you have made it a part of your automatic system that is now causing a lot of problems in the relationship that you're with. Now, neuroscience has always shown that the brain is plastic, and what that means is that it has the capacity to rewire itself. That is what neuroplasticity is really all about. So, with consistent therapy and consistent relearning of a better way to survive, your prefrontal cortex is now strengthened to stay in control, right? And lying patterns become very, very weakened. So it takes time and it takes trust, really. But healing, by all means, is possible. Even if you cannot afford to go for therapy, you could start with finding somebody who truly cares about you, who is willing to listen to you without judgment, whom you believe you can be yourself with. If you find that person, that could be a very good start. But that person may not be equipped enough to help heal the wound that eventually led to this survival coping mechanism in the first place. But what it does is that it starts to create an environment of safety, which makes you see that it's okay to tell the truth, because telling the truth in this context makes you feel safe. So now this part is for you who is listening, but you're not a pathological liar, but you love someone or you work with someone who is a pathological liar. How can you help this person? What can you do? Your first instincts may just be to be angry. Why can't they just tell the truth? What's so difficult about telling the truth? Remember, With everything that we've discussed here today, they are not just lying, but they are afraid. And fear is at the root of why they are lying. They don't want you to perceive them in a certain way. They don't want you to judge them in a certain way. They don't want your relationship with them to go sour. They just want to be accepted, which is a natural human phenomenon. So the key is to have compassion, you know, but have that compassion with boundaries. And that is really where my focus is. You can acknowledge that they are struggling while also protecting yourself from harm. And how do you really protect yourself from harm? You can set limits to the kind of information that you expose them to. You can understand that for this particular person, though this person is dealing with this, right? I need to also second guess and second check what this person is really telling me, while also encouraging them to be honest and, also taking away where they have been before, punishment, you really, right, for not coming out with the truth. But ultimately, pathological liars do not need more fear. They have enough to last them for a lifetime. So, if you've learned anything today, pathological liars are often children who learned lying as a survival strategy. So, there's that little inner child that is yet to be healed, and that healing really requires therapy, safety, and compassion. So, the next time you see someone who is a chronic liar, or is the master of deception, right? Compassion, not just confrontation, may be the first step towards helping them to really consider how their action is really impacting other people. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. And as always, if you are a pathological or you've been called a pathological liar listening to this, be kind to yourself. And if you'd like someone to walk you through, please feel free to reach out to us. Drop a comment, send me a DM. I'm more than willing to work with you. But till I see you next time, remember to be kind to yourself. You know that I'm rooting for you. Cheers.